the fundamental lie of globalization is that we will do the innovation and they will do the production. But the reality is that innovation is a consequence of productivity. If you don't make the thing, you cede your opportunity to innovate on the thing.
Hey everyone, welcome. I'm here with two American heroes, Senator Banks and Shyam Sankar. We're going to start with the senator. Everyone's talking about AI. We're in a global race. How do you think about the stakes of the AI race? How do you think about America's position relative to China?
Well, first of all, this is an incredible audience, a great event. This is the fourth one that I've attended. Jacob Hellberg's vision with Hill and Valley, watching it grow into this is really incredible. So thank you for all being here. The crowd is bigger and better. The venue is great. There's even a guy here that dated one of the Kardashians, so which is amazing. So I think he's backstage. But to all of you, what you do, your counsel and advice is always appreciated in our office. The AI race, I think about if the first Cold War was related to and centered around nuclear weapons, the second Cold War is related to the AI race, and we can't let China win it. I mean, that's the bottom line. And I think the Trump administration, the White House more than ever before gets this. I mean, the AI action plan that was released at the beginning of the second Trump term, calling for stricter export controls on chips to China and to our adversaries is the bottom line. And it's why I introduced the GAIN AI Act several months ago. We passed it out of the Senate, and the NDAA was stripped out in the conference committee. Fortunately, in the Commerce Department's H200 rulemaking, they incorporated much of GAIN AI into the H200 chips rules. So that's good, but Congress needs to codify it, and we need to make sure that we're not helping our biggest enemy. I mean, that's the big picture on Capitol Hill. I find now that I'm a senator, it's a wholly different body in the Senate than it was in the House. I feel like I'm serving at times in a nursing home, which is in the House. It's more of a fight, more vibrant. I don't miss the House. I love being a senator. But one thing that I've come, and you're going to hear from Speaker Mike Johnson here in a little bit, and I give him a lot of credit because he truly is a China hawk that understands many of these issues and the AI race. But I do feel like the House of Representatives is more hawkish. I feel like they get it more. There's more of a focus. The China committee the select committee on China that I was a part of, that Mike Gallagher led so well in the House, there's nothing like that in the Senate. So when it comes to the AI race, the Senate needs to be more focused, and a few of us who are part of this new generation of leadership in the Senate need to make sure that we win this race and win the fight.
So Senator Banks was in the Navy, Naval Reserve as an officer. Shyam recently enlisted in the Army Reserve. Thank you guys for your service. Truly, and Shyam, incredibly inspiring for someone to do that after starting a multi-cent-billion-dollar company. You also recently wrote a book called Mobilize, where you're calling for reformation of the defense space. So how do you think about, you're leading from the front, and how do you think about what we need to do to be more competitive?
Yeah, I wrote the book because if you really take a sober-eyed view of the last 12 years or so, it's clear that until very recent actions, you could say Midnight Hammer, Maduro, we've been losing deterrence. We had the annexation of Crimea in 2014, the militarization of the Spratly Islands in 15, breakout capability getting the bomb with Iran in 17. We've had a pogrom in Israel. We have the Houthis holding trade hostage in the Red Sea, thing after thing. You could say in a cold-eyed way, our adversaries are not sufficiently scared of us to deter a broader conflict. And will we look back in 10 years and say, actually, World War III had already started, we just didn't realize it? What would we need to do counterfactually to make sure that didn't actually happen? And if you have a clear-eyed view of the industrial base, and the lessons of Ukraine, I think We've probably had 4 Sputnik moments over the last little few years here, from the hypersonic glide vehicle to one from Ukraine was that we went through 10 years of production in 10 weeks of fighting. And that means we got the fundamental calculus at the end of the Cold War wrong, that the stockpile was going to be the deterrent. It's not. It's the factory. It's the ability to generate and regenerate the stockpile.
Yeah. Senator Banks, compute is all the rage. AI is all the rage. There was an incident this week where a Supermicro co-founder, was caught smuggling GPUs to China, or allegedly caught. One of the places where we're strong right now is NVIDIA, top of the compute stack, design. How do you think about limiting, exports to China with compute, which obviously incentivizes them to, develop their own solution? How do you think about this challenge?
Well, we need greater congressional oversight. This week, Senator Elizabeth Warren and myself, in a very bipartisan way, called for greater oversight of this subject, calling attention to the Department of Commerce to, obviously, we've been misled. So we need hearings in the committee. We need, in my opinion, we need markups in the Senate Banking and Housing Committee that I'm a part of. Senator Tom Cotton has been drawing a lot of attention to this recent news as well. But it gets back to what I was talking about earlier, and I didn't adequately answer your question. I mean, this isn't just a technological race, a fight over who's going to get the best technology and win the AI race first. This is a moral fight, and we know that the PRC is going to lie, steal, and cheat, and that this is more evidence of it. So what happens if they win the AI race? How will they dominate our future and our kids' futures? We can't let them do that. And that's why export controls are so important. And the GAIN AI Act, which I believe it's my bill, so I'm biased, but I believe it's the best path forward for stronger controls over our best chips being sent to our biggest enemy and preventing that from happening. And when there is a domestic customer base in the United States of America, they should get priority for American-made chips over our biggest enemy that wants to take those chips and dominate the rest of the world, especially America's ability to create good jobs and meet the needs and the economic needs of the future that are going to create the jobs that our kids are going to need to survive. So we have to win that fight, and I think I think Congress is clearly not doing enough, which is why in a bipartisan way, many of us are calling for tighter controls, markup hearings on these bills, and greater oversight, and that's something that hasn't happened adequately yet.
And I would add on to that. I think I welcome all of the involvement from Congress in doing exactly that. We need to play defense. We also need to play offense. I think by and large, AI is an American birthright. It came from the U.S. The Chinese only have it from distillation attacks. There's a reason they open sourced it, to destroy economic value that we've been all investing in here. The one place they have a marginal advantage is they're a little bit more practical about what they're trying to do with it. They view it as something to implement for economic advantage, while our labs are obsessed with this pursuit of AGI, which I'm glad we have an aspirational goal like getting to Mars. But there are places where this becomes a pathology, where, as Pascal said, every human has a God-shaped hole in their heart. And I fear that too many of our labs have filled that hole with AGI in a way that has led to these prognostications of doomerism, that it's going to lead to mass unemployment. The sort of shtick, which is both helpful perhaps for them at the margin with fundraising and honestly what they believe is an article of faith, is leading to kind of panic amongst the American people. And our greatest risk is that we don't out-execute on the offense side of implementing AI for economic advantage. And I would offer to the audience that my view, the normative value of AI is to give the American worker superpowers. How do you make the American worker 50 times more productive than any other worker anywhere else, and use that to underwrite the logic of reindustrialization? And many of the folks who've been on the stage today have been talking about exactly that, whether it's MP Materials or Hadrian or the next generation of companies. This is obvious. They're AI native and they're seizing this opportunity.
Sean, we'll just stay on the reindustrialization theme. Sean, CTO of Palantir, and you guys are working on major efforts for reindustrialization, including with shipbuilding. For a century, America was dominant manufacturer in the world. Today we're far behind. How do you think about reindustrialization? Like, what is the path to, being back at the top?
The 20th century was built by American hands, and I think we have an opportunity for the 21st century to be built by as well. The fundamental lie of globalization is that we will do the innovation and they will do the production. But the reality is that innovation is a consequence of productivity. If you don't make the thing, you cede your opportunity to innovate on the thing. And I'll offer you, for those of you who are AGI-pilled, the most obvious example is what motivated Google to do the research in 2017 that led to the attention is all you need paper that set off the AI revolution. A desire to get a 3% incremental improvement in Google Translate. You cannot think of something more banal that fits this theme of innovation as a consequence of productivity than exactly that. Now, for us, that means we actually need to be reindustrialization maximalists. I think things like friendshoring, these half measures are wrong. You're just moving the stimulus around to someone else. And then we need to be able to do this asymmetrically. If you look at the dawn of World War II, we, America, were the best at mass production. We had just perfected it. The Germans were categorically better engineers. They made much more exotic things in much smaller quantities. Unfortunately, that is us today, and our adversary is the best at mass production. And we have an opportunity of fixing this both, even if you just look at defense, that's the wedge issue. Like, yeah, we need a lot more weapons. Having 8 days of weapons on hand to fight China is not a sufficient deterrent. But that actually is the wedge that allows us to reindustrialize the broader economy.
Love it. Well said. Senator Banks, this is a heavy time. America is at war, Operation Epic Fury. What are some of the lessons that we've learned around how to, quickly deploy new technologies, develop new technologies, especially at a time where the technologies of war are changing rapidly?
Well, Operation Epic Fury has been so enormously successful. We can't discount that. I mean, what President Trump and the military have done to wipe out Iran's ballistic missile stockpiles, decimate further their ability to achieve and build a nuclear weapon, and then just weaken them to the bone so that they lack the funding and resources that they can funnel to their proxy terrorist groups that cause so much pain around the world and attack Americans and our allies. So we got to keep up the pressure. I know there's been some, there's been good news lately that there might be a resolution sooner than later, and that's good. But we got to finish the fight before we leave and give up the pressure. But what do we learn in Iran that we learn in every single war game, whether it's a war with China over Taiwan or any major conflict? It's how quickly we run out of our own munition stockpiles. So we have to rebuild that. That's why the White House and Secretary Hegseth are calling for a $200 billion supplemental, which is a lot of money. And if Sham's book Mobilize teaches us anything, it's that pouring a bunch of money in the Pentagon doesn't solve. It's not the silver bullet. Doesn't solve all of our problems. We have to completely revamp the bureaucracy of the Pentagon to make sure that $200 billion is going into the priorities and quickly building munitions and supplying America with what we need to be ready to continue to fight more in Iran or whatever conflict that might be. Indiana is the crossroads of America. We're also the #1 manufacturing state per capita. So we care a lot about rebuilding our industrial base in the United States. We make everything from Humvees to satellites at L3 Harris to engines at Rolls-Royce and lots of other things around our state that we're very proud of. But one big, and I'll finish on this note, one big announcement that's maybe the biggest announcement in Indiana defense-wise that I've seen since I've been in Congress is a new munitions plant at Crane Navy Base a few weeks ago, a joint partnership between Kratos, a great American company, and Rafael, a great Israeli company, one of our greatest allies, coming together to build a munitions plant for solid rocket motors with that's largely made possible because of the investment in the big, beautiful bill, the reconciliation bill that we passed. So we need a lot, the lesson learned is that we need a lot more of that strategic thinking and reinvestment in our own industrial base in the United States. And that's why Shyam's book is so good and so important, because I think it teaches us a path forward on how to make that happen. And I think that's why all of us are in the room here today, too.
Amen. So, Shyam, I'm going to go off script, but you're very quick on your feet, so you'll be okay. What are your lessons from Operation Epic Fury? Like, what have you updated in your priors post the last month?
Well, I think it's really validated the investments in the third offset, that we need to continue to build the capabilities that allow us to outthink the adversary, to have an OODA loop that gives us decision-making dominance. I think it also underlines that we need to model all of our munitions, regardless of how exquisite they are, as consumables. Whatever you make, you need a plan that you are going to consume and use, not that you're going to put them on the shelf and admire. And without that stimulus of volume and production, you don't get to the cost curve and economies of scale and a robust supply base underneath that. And then I think you need to bring those same lessons down to the low end of the mix, the attritables, the consumables, where I think, there are real lessons that we should be fielding many, many more platforms. This is the environment. This is the ultimate exercise. Reality is the ultimate exercise. We should be learning. This is replacing tests. We built 154 different airframes in World War II. Maybe 10 of them mattered. We should be fielding 154 different Lucas variants right now to see which 10 are going to fuck up the adversary.
Amen. We have 30 seconds. Any final remarks?
I think there's a unique opportunity in this moment to remember that the industrial base that won World War II in the early Cold War was not a defense industrial base. It was an American industrial base. Chrysler was the prime contractor on the Minuteman. They built missiles and minivans. General Mills, the cereal company, built torpedoes. It is only a consequence of having won the Cold War that we had this great schism that divided our industrial base and put our defense providers on the Galapagos Islands, and that we had the thriving commercial sector here. And I think if we're clear-eyed about deterring broader conflict, it will require us to reimagine how every company is equally invested in freedom and prosperity.
I'll just add, I think this is it's such an exciting time with Hegseth and Feinberg and Driscoll and Phelan, all these guys that President Trump has put in at the Pentagon to try to shake it up. I've never seen anything like it, and it makes this an exciting time for all of you. Don't give up. Right now, in the next couple of years with this administration, we can make up for a lot of the mistakes of the last few decades. And as a member of the Armed Services Committee in the Senate, I hope you'll come and further educate us and teach us how to partner together. That's what this whole conference is about, and I appreciate that all of you are here.
Don't sleep on America. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.